this time I'm excited to talk to Epidiah Ravachol, basically about Swords Without Master, which is this is a fix-up. I'll go ahead and switch to
Hmm.
this so you can actually see me. This is a fix-up, basically, as he calls it, basically of an older, basically released in basically an earlier zine, I think is the correct way to say it.
Yeah.
But so basically, why don't you go ahead and basically, Epidiah, why don't you go ahead and introduce Swords Without Masters and tell us a little bit about it's basically it's a really interesting and unique thing. So I think it's best if you describe it because
All right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, Swords is where to start? It is my love letter to sword and sorcery, a genre that I enjoyed immensely when I was younger, and then kind of had a resurgence in my life a little over about 15 years ago. Every Somebody recently told me that I've reached the age where if I guess how many years ago it was, I should double it. Like that's the the rule of thumb. So I'm going to say 16 to 18 years ago. But it's a game that I'm trying to think of like the best way to describe it. So you play sword and sorcery heroes. We call them rogues in the game. I drawing not from like the D&D understanding of a rogue, but from a more classic approach to the word. The rogue meaning somebody that just exists outside of society, somebody who's not like beholden. And this is like throughout Sword and Sorcery, you run into these characters. This is Conan and Elric and Fufford and Grey Mouser and the lot. But you play these rogues who are going through Sword and Sorcery adventures. Uh, Yeah, I think the key thing that kind of sets it apart is that in the game, instead of like rolling to see if you succeed at things, you roll to determine the tone of the narration that you're going to do, describing how your character either succeeds or fails at whatever they do, however you want to do. It's a roll you make before you speak, so it's like you put your fortune in front of what's happening rather than afterwards. You don't say, "Oh, I'm gonna run this person through with my sword," and then roll to see if that happens. You may have in your mind that, "Hey, I would love to run this person through with my sword," but then you roll the dice and you get a particular tone that either suggests that that is the case or that is not the case. There are other things that dice can tell you throughout the game, but that's a large portion of it. The other kind of big thing about the game is that it's more about the crafting of the story with you and your friends. Like you do play the rogues. You do. There's a you embody that character. You champion that character like you would in other role playing games. But the goal is to make sure you're telling a thrilling tale of sword and sorcery. So the rules will sometimes try and get in the way, and sometimes try and help you along in that case. And while I got a quick question. Should I just describe all the rules, or is
I
that like
mean
a
basically
good
it's
intro to it?
basically I basically normally I'd be like we don't basically you don't really basically we're not playing it so we don't need to do a full rule summary, but I feel like in
Right.
this case basically a quick description of what the rules are basically is really helpful because basically like you're talking about here your rule system is very much designed to it is not a basically you're going basically the dice are there to tell you how well you've done what you've done, but basically they're there to kind of they're much more like I like a lot of times people ask me what is role playing, what is things like that. I like to describe it as it's improv with dice. And this
Right.
is even kind of more of that, more forward of that, because it's like, here's your prompt, go. And basically, I think it's interesting if you could describe the various ways that those prompts work and
Sure.
how basically how the players are interacting with each other because I think that's kind of the interesting thing that's different here because this isn't just a game of you have a basically in your case the basically the overplay that's not the right word for it overplay it's
Yeah.
just overplay
Overplayer. Yeah.
the overplayer who's basically who's kind of like game what a game master would be another game but they're not the final arbiter. They're the final arbiter, but they're not the
Right.
only arbiter. And so I think it's really
Yes.
interesting if you can kind of describe how that interaction plays and how that changes, because there's different ways that changes throughout.
Yeah. So the game, a lot of the design of the game makes sure that like no single person has is the arbiter, right? Like
Mhm.
there are moments. Okay, so yeah, I'll quickly see how quickly I could describe how the game works, right? So, uh, rogue players, those are the people playing the rogues. They're not the overplayer. They'll make their characters. There's not a whole lot to making characters. I won't go into it, but it's very quick. It's a very simple process. You have your characters. You sit down to play, and then the overplayer throws two six-sided dice. One die is the glum die. One die is the jovial die. You have to be able to tell these dice apart. I have these are the pair that I designed the game with. Oh wait, I don't know if this is going to be on camera or not. There we go. But like I always have those on hand. But those are the ones I used when I was coming up with the game. So you have to be able to tell these dice apart. You throw them. Whichever one's higher is going to be the tone, right? When the overplayer rolls the dice, the tone is called the overtone, and that's the tone that everyone's in until they get to roll the dice. Here's a quick distinction between this game and other games, that like you don't bring your own dice. Everyone's sharing the same pair of dice now, unless you're playing online and then you have to like somehow just indicate who has the dice or whatever. But it's important because this game involves passing the dice around as part of its sort of central mechanic here. So overplayer rolls, introduces the scene. When they do that, they put you in a situation. They can do whatever they want. They have total control over that moment. But they can't say like what your rogue is thinking. But you could be like, you're in pain, you're in prison and being tortured by an evil sorcerer or whatever. And then they either, depending on what phase you're in, there's three different phases, but they either hand the dice to someone. Well, they pick the dice up and then they hand them to someone, and then that person either rolls right away and does something about what's going on, which is the case, like, or they wait until the over. Well, okay, hold on. Let me tell you about the phases. I'm getting ahead of myself. What's happening? So there's three phases. You're in these phases or between them at any point in the game. There's the perilous phase. This is the phase where the rogues' lives are on the line. This is when violence and danger and thrills abound. In the perilous phase, what happens is the overplayer will hand the dice to someone and then start describing whatever you have to face. It's called the storm, but it could be anything. It could be like an army of skeletons. It could be a dragon. It could be like that sorcerer we were just talking about. Something that is imperiling your characters or the things that they love the most, or whatever. While the overplayer is talking, they just tell you what's happening. You can react to it, but you cannot do something to like succumb or overcome it, right? Like you can slip and struggle with it, but you can't fundamentally alter what's going on, except for the person that has the dice. And they just roll the dice whenever they want the overplayer to shut up and take over to say what their hero is doing about it. And then if they want, describe how excuse me, if they want, describe whether or not they've actually dealt with the situation. It's up to you. There's a lot in the text about like when to make those sorts of decisions. Like if I'm describing a bunch of skeletons that are attacking, and you're like, that is hackney. I don't care. I'm bored with it. I'm just gonna wipe them out with a single like roll the dice. My barbarian rides his saber-toothed tiger into the middle of them and just sends them flying. That's fine. You've just said, I don't care about these skeletons. Give me something better. And that's part of the game, right? Like there's this sort of back and forth. In that perilous phase, whoever rolled the dice can decide if that phase ends after they narrate it. If it doesn't end, the overplayer comes back with more stuff, and the dice have to be passed to someone else who then gets to roll to interrupt them. that roughly is what there's more to it, obviously, but I'm doing like a speed run of the rules here. The discovery phase is a phase in which like you're learning about the world either through the immediate experiences of your rogues or their memories or their discussions with people. It's important to kind of keep in mind that while the perilous phase is kind of associated with like combat or whatever, it doesn't mean that it has to be done in combat. And the same thing with like the discovery phase can happen in the middle of a battle. Like you could discover something, you could be sword fighting with someone and then describe a conversation where they reveal a secret to you or whatever. In the discovery phase, your dice are handed to you, you roll right away, you make a discovery in the tone, and whatever you come up with, you're going to have to ask the overplayer a leading question about it, something that's not a yes, that doesn't have a yes or no answer. You could be like, in the middle of the battle, you can fight a glowing sword on the ground, and you're like, just make up that you're discovering a magic sword, which is, I always want one. And then you get to ask, like, why was it left here? Like, who left it here? For the overplayer to answer, and that gives the overplayer a chance to put a little spin on it, to maybe make it like, I don't know if I should let you have a magic sword right now. So it was left here because it was cursed, that kind of thing. You don't have to be that antagonistic, but you can. You have the opportunity. And then the final phase in the basic game is the rogues phase, which is just like unleashing the rogues, letting them do the thing they do. That phase is like kind of a call and answer thing. The overplayer starts it just like the other two phases, but then makes a demand of the rogues. That always starts with a ritual phrase like "show us how," or "show us this," like "show us how you turn the fleet away from the shores," and then hand the dice to a rogue player, and they roll the dice, and then describe how that happens in the tone of the dice. And then once they've answered that, they get to make a demand of another rogue player, and you kind of just go around until someone's like, "We're done with this phase. You can move on to another one." While all that's happening, the dice are going to tell you your tone that you're in, but they're also going to indicate whether you get like a moral or a mystery. A moral is like you've done something that has an unintended consequence, and you're going to have to write a little lesson about it. Doesn't mean it's a lesson that your character has learned or will learn. It's a lesson that your character should learn, and quite often they don't. I mean, like that's sort of the moral of every sword and sorcery story is just, nah, I'm not going to learn that. I'm going to keep doing my thing. Or you could roll what's called a mystery. A mystery, you're prevented from doing what you're doing by some unknown or supernatural event, and you get to write a question about that. It's important. These things that you're writing, these are called threads. They'll end up on the table in front of everyone else. While you're playing, regardless of whatever dice are rolled, if you hear someone who's also, like a fellow player say something that just it's really evocative of sword and sorcery to you, then you take what's called a motif, which is another one of these threads, and you write that down. And as you fill in these motifs, you end up, that's sort of the countdown timer for your story. So the more you fill in, by the time you reach, like, you have like 3 elements on each motif. So once you've written down 9 motifs, you're entering the end game. The game runs pretty swiftly. You have control over how fast it runs because you're, as a group, are deciding, when to write these motifs. But we've done like incredibly fast games of it. I've a few years back we did some. You can find them on YouTube. We did some speed runs of swords, and I think like the shortest was like 45 minutes, a little under 45 minutes or something like that. And it's like a complete story, but you're just kind of like hitting the highlights as you go along. But you can take longer if you'd like. And the end game plays like the normal game, but you start reincorporating those threads that you made, the motifs, the morals, and the mysteries, to just sort of assure everyone that this is in fact what the story was about, and get to the end. Yeah,
cool.
That's
Yeah, basically, it's really
Yeah.
interesting. Basically, the reason why I wanted you to talk about it, because I want to be able to call out some of that stuff, because each of those phases, basically, like you talked about a little bit with they're not necessarily the perilous phase lends itself to combat, but isn't
Yeah.
necessarily you go into combat, you have to go into perilous phase. It's
Right.
more about how the table wants to interact at a given moment, and it's really interesting from the standpoint of this is basically this game basically from basically I read the older version of the rules basically as a clarification. This
Mhm.
is like we talked about this basically being a fix up. It's coming back basically. It's coming back basically as a full game as opposed to being a basically kind of a one shot in a zine. It's coming basically. It's going to be a larger book with more art and basically more
Yeah.
details and cool basically lots of stuff. But basically reading through the rules, it's really interesting because basically at any given point the table kind of sits down and decides. Basically, the overplayer may push it in a direction. They'll start it and they'll be like, "I think we're basically." They kind of they start the ball rolling, but everybody at the table is participating in terms of, "Hey, what's going on?" And the table decides, "Hey, we want this to be more question and answer." Okay, we'll switch to a
Yeah.
different phase that basically makes it more that we want this to be more basically more of a basically a building threat, basically something that's going on that one person is mostly controlling the narrative of, and other people are guiding in to help or steer. Then you're switching into like perilous mode, and discovery is more like, hey, let's just talk about what's going on, and let's basically. I like how you describe it as basically you're asking loaded questions.
Yeah.
You're hey, I want to insert this into the narrative, and you're kind of presenting that to the overplayer as I want to add this to the narrative, and the overplayer has final say, but you're really kind of trying to push them into like basically you talk about basically what vile price does this require. So you're like obviously like I want this to cost my character something bad, basically not necessarily good for the character. Something basically make it narratively interesting in this way, basically because that's what I'm picturing the situation. The player goes, "Oh yeah, I see what you're going for," and pushes it, and the dice are there to sometimes be like, "I know everybody thinks it's going to go this way, but let's go somewhere different. Let's do something. Let's do something interesting. Let's." Change it because you have things for ties and things like that where occasionally the dice will just say flip it basically. I
Hmm.
mean, you think it's all going this way, change it up completely, and everyone at the table has to stop and deal with that new kind of situation. So, I guess basically my first question to you is, in terms of who these kind of people basically this game is aimed at, what is your idea for the basically target market? Is this basically because there's lots of different ways this go basically in terms of is it for beginning role players because you think that basically they'd be like, hey, this should encourage you, is this more expert? Hey, basically everyone at the table. What are your thoughts about that in terms of experience level coming into this game?
Yeah. I mean, that's a good question. The it's interesting to it's a thing that I think about a lot. Like, what um because you can come into this as like, oh, I understand role playing games. This should be easy, or
Mm-hmm.
so, and then end up kind of stumbling over it a little bit
Mm-hmm.
because it doesn't work the way you expect, based on what your experiences were, right? Like, and that's true of like, I mean, there's a rough estimate 30 trillion role playing games out there. I'm not sure what the exact count is.
You may be
Uh,
underselling it, yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, like, there's at least 200,000 more every day, so it doesn't, but and that's good. I'm not complaining. I don't want to come
No.
across as complaining. So like, you can't like, there's traditions in it and ways that people play, and there's certain ways that like you can play a game, that will work really well with it, and other ways where it's like, okay, you got to relearn. You got to, it's like any game. You just, okay, that tactic isn't going to work here.
Mhm,
That's not
mhm.
going to help you out. So like, I like to kind of come at it from assuming a blank slate, just because I can't. It's a moving target.
Mhm.
Like, when you look at like people who have played. That said, like, it doesn't matter. We're all going to rely on some, sort of knowledge. Like we mentioned a few times, that this game was originally published in a magazine, the Worlds Without Master, which was I can't remember how many pages this game was. Oh wait, no, I have it up on this PDF here. It's about 30 pages long. But like I wrote it, it's a tight 30 for what the game is. Like one of the reasons why we're doing the fix up is that I'd like to like spend a little more time explaining a lot of this stuff. And I want to kind of hit different ways of learning the game. One of the things I did years ago before the game itself came out is I made a preview of the game, the City of Fire and Coin, which is like a play along adventure is what we're calling it, where you just kind of read it out loud and do as the thing says. And you know, to try and teach the game as you go along. That's going to be part of the rule. You know, like that's one of the approaches we're going to take. We've got the rules as they exist in the magazine. That's going to be there as well. There's going to be the rules sort of set apart as a just a very well indexed sort of like if you just need a rules reference, because the language in the game itself gets quite flowery. It's purple prose, right? Like it's meant to evoke the pulpy sword and sorcery that it's inspired by. But if you're in the middle of the game and you just need an answer, sometimes that's not helpful. So, you know, we'll have like a nice reference section that's a little drier and just, you know, straightforward. I'm going to have like an example of play, like, just several different ways of coming about how to learn to play the game. And then there's also going to be some games that just, like additional games that focus on different phases or different parts of the game to just kind of help you exercise those muscles, right? Like there's in the same magazine later, a later issue of Worlds Without Master, we had a game called Sorcerer's Bloody Sorceress, which was a murder mystery based on the discovery phase of oh no, wait, hold on. I am telling lies. It's based on the rogues phase. It's been a while. But like, you know, you get like interrogating your fellow suspects and things like that. It's still a sword and sorcery murder mystery game. There's a young kingling that the rules over a falling, an empire that's falling apart, and he's poisoned while you're at this banquet with him, and everyone has a motivation for killing him, and now you have to figure out which amongst you has done it. There's a few other games that are going to be like that in there that just kind of like focus on different parts of it in case you just, let's see what we can do with just the perilous phase. Let's see what we can do with just the discovery phase and that kind of thing.
Yeah, by no means basically you have the 3 phases, but again, like you said earlier, nothing forces you really to switch except the table deciding, hey, basically we feel like we want to change this, we want to change up what's going on here. This isn't really fitting the tone we're doing. And so if you have a story where the entire story basically fits within that tone, nothing stops you game mechanics wise from just continuing in that with that same thing. You're still getting different things, you're still having things, you can have active combats, you can have basically reading through it, I really got the feeling like basically this kind of, a lot of times this can feel like the good parts version of a role-playing session, kind of like a sword and sorcery movie. Like your tabletop sessions never quite capture it basically because it's like an hour and a half, 2-hour movie, and it gets all of those parts in it. Whereas your D&D session is going to take several months to cover what might take one movie to cover. A movie could cover, because there's sometimes it's like stuff happens. Basically you're in the tavern afterwards discussing what happens or recovering from the after effects, and you can do that in this system because this system lets you do a flash forward and then just basically discuss what just happened as a kind of bits and pieces of a flashback as you're having a conversation.
You're completely unmoored in time. I've played a lot of this game, but one of like sometimes we just like we'll start with a perilous phase, and then like the rogue players will all die in that perilous phase, and then we'll just jump back a month
Mhm.
ahead, and just be like, all right, let's see what led to this doomed moment, that kind of thing.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah, it's, I mean, games are interesting because they're both like, they're like this pile of affordances and constraints, right? That you could do this or you can't do that, or putting you
mhm,
setting before you what your options can be and whatnot. But they're also like a set of tools, right? Like
mhm,
you
mhm,
can you want to make something feel this way. Here's a bunch of things that you could do. What one do you want to use? Like
mhm,
what one do you think will accomplish what you're looking for here? And so yeah, I want to have, like, I like that the game meets you where you need it to be.
mhm,
When you, like an example is there's the game is very careful to talk about like whose responsibilities are in certain situations,
mhm,
right? If you're doing a perilous phase and you're fighting with something, um, and I've handed the dice to you. I'm the overplayer. I hand the dice to you, and I just start describing a giant scorpion. I'm got a real Harryhausen vibe going on here. I'm thinking of like the old, uh, but
skeletons and scorpions and all the
yeah,
good
yeah,
things.
exactly. Uh, I start describing this giant scorpion coming at you, and you describe, you roll the dice. It's jovial. You describe a very boisterous attack where you jump at it with your spear, but then you get to, like, you as the rogue player, you can decide what that accomplishes, right? Like you
Mhm,
can skewer that skeleton or that scorpion if you want, or you could be like, I fall into its, you know, grasping claws or whatever, or you can leave that on the table, and it's then the overplayer's responsibility, right?
mhm,
It's and that's like a personal choice. Like that's a there are players that are going to just eat that up. They're going to love being able to say what happens when they jump at a scorpion with the spear, and there are other players who want to have that like they want to have that resistance applied by someone else, right? Like they
mhm,
want to be like, okay, I do this. Now you tell me what happens. Like you tell me how the people react to what I
mhm,
did, and it's not so much that the game is like, okay, decide, you choose however you want to do it. It says, if you don't do it, the overplayer will do it. Like this is a thing. Uh, if you roll a moral and you have to come up with a consequence, it's the overplayer's duty to make sure that that consequence has bite. So you could come up with like, as you jump at the scorpion, you roll a moral, and you're like, I run it through. You don't even care about the consequence. You're just like, I
mhm,
run it through with my spear. It's dead. And then because you didn't give it a consequence at all, the overplayer is like, okay, well now I got to come up with something. And it, in the last moment as you're walking away with it to the crowd cheering, its death spasm sends its stinger into your calf, or something like that.
mhm,
And
mhm.
uh, yeah, so it's just like, I forget a little bit what my point was. I got rolled up into the scorpion, but I know, it's just the, there was a lot of attention done to like who is responsible for what parts, so you can
Mhm,
kind of like, it gives you like room to wiggle around in, but it ensures that these things happen, right? Like you can describe things however you want, but like in the end, it'll fall down or it'll fall down to someone to do certain things.
mhm.
Um, yeah.
Yeah, basically, I basically my follow up question that would be basically we've talked a lot about like sword and sorcery, Harryhausen,
Mhm.
Conan, things like that as your basically influences. So do you want to talk a little bit about basically because this is such a unique thing? Obviously, you took in some influences, Conan, basically Harryhausen, and basically went. I want to make something that is basically I don't want to just make it basically because you can basically there's thousands of them out there Conan RPGs and things like that. but something about this genre spoke to you, and something in the way, something that you were watching, you were occurring that said, I want this to be more dramatic. I want this to be more basically kind of going back and basically what kind of, you want to talk a little bit about what design, the philosophy as it were, that led you from sword and sorcery, hack and slash, epic encounters, storm ships at sea to, hey, let's go with basically demanding stuff from players and basically interrogation and basically a single set of dice. What was that journey kind of like?
Yeah, so this is it's a literal journey actually. So it happened on a train. What happened is all right, so it was a group of friends of mine. I was living in New York at the time. There was a convention, like a little tiny convention in Western Massachusetts called JiffyCon. That was it was a nice little convention for a lot of like indie game designers that were just kind of getting started at the time. And a friend of mine had introduced me to this convention. At one point, we were going to come out to it, and we thought it'd be kind of fun for us to like design a game in the week before the JiffyCon. We called it a game in a jiffy. It's not why the convention was called JiffyCon, but like it worked.
It works out.
Yeah. And the concept was we were going to sit down and just, with the barest idea of a game, make one as we're playing it. This is a style of design that we called play storming, which was meant to be like kind of a joke. It felt like a very corporate word for it. But it turned out it stuck, and I love play storming, so we're gonna just call it play storming. In play storming, you come to the table, you just have like maybe an idea for a game or like a little rule, nothing big, very little, and then as you play, people just get to make up the rules as they're going, and you can take them or you can toss them aside. You just basically design the game as part of your play, and not the first time, but the second time we did this game in a jiffy. The idea that we came to the table with, it was brought about by a friend's observation about the movie Thunderdome, or Beyond Thunderdome, the Mad Max one from way back when. And he had said that like the movie itself couldn't decide if it was like this zany comedy or this grim post-apocalyptic story. And so at any point, it was like someone was behind the scenes rolling two dice, one zany, one grim, to decide what that scene was going to play out like. And we're like, okay, let's do it. And we sat down on a Friday night and we wrote a game called Monkey Dome, which is that. It's zany and grim. It's the perilous phase that's in Rogues. It's nothing but the perilous phase over and over again. It's relentless. We played it, came up with most of the rules that made up like the perilous phase and the rolling of the dice and the morals, which were called lessons in that, and the tones. Like I said, zany and grim were those tones. We bring them kind of closer together in swords. But so we did that, had a lot of fun doing it, spent an entire week like refining that game, writing it. I had friends illustrate it. We put it out. We took it out to a Staples and printed up copies of it and brought it to the convention, and to give away. Just like, hey, look, we made this game in a jiffy. This is fun. On the train ride from New York to Western Massachusetts, while we were heading out, after we'd spent an entire week doing nothing but thinking about this game, and I got to tell you, like normally I would be very tired, like I would just be done with. I'd be so ready to play any other game. We're on this train ride, and I can't remember exact. It was, I think, Amtrak. It was just running late. It was running slow on the track or whatever. My buddies were there. One of them was like, "Hey, I got an idea. I'd like to run Monkey Dome, but it's going to be a Western, and your tones are young and guns." And it was an absolute delight. We couldn't wait to play. We played it, just had an amazing time. And I was sitting on this train, staring out the window, and like for a long, like, several years now, I have been thinking like, I really want to do a sword and sorcery game, but I want to make sure I'm not doing D&D again, right? Like that exists, and there are many wonderful sword and sorcery games in that vein. I don't need to pile on to that. Like I want to find a new angle to it, and it hit me. I was like, this is it. This is the one that's going to be it, and went from there. So like I said, the perilous phase, the tone dice, the morals, those are all from Monkey Dome. And then the other phases, the other threads, and then like a few other things like in swords. When you make characters in swords, you have to come up with what we call an Idolon, which is something of our world that represents your character, that makes you think of your character, makes you reminds you of your character. And usually this is like a piece of art. It's usually the easiest thing to reach for. It doesn't have to be. It could be a song. It could be, well, I mean, I guess songs are art as well, but like it could be the actor you would think that would play them in the movie, or it could be. We did a fun game where everyone brought drinks that were representative of the drinks from their rogues culture, which is kind of a cool way to like be like, yeah, this is, it says something about your rogue that they drink this instead of that. And anyways, man, I went on a tangent there. What was I gonna? Anyways, it
basically just talking about basically how it all kind of comes together, and basically the interesting basically the fact that basically it develops out of these interesting things, these mechanics of, hey, a lot of times you're feeling like, hey, basically these things shift and move, and it's not just a solid basically, oh, it's always going to be wacky and funny. You're playing Tune or something like that. It's not going to always be horror and basically terrible and basically something like that. If you're playing another game like Dread, which you also wrote, basically in terms of, and even Dread has its moments of basically can be absolutely wacky and silly if you wanted to. But basically giving that kind of insight to the players, like, okay, this is what we're going for. Okay, now shift yourself a little bit, basically, because things are going to shift back and forth. And like you said, basically the players could still be like, oh, I slayed the scorpion instantly, but okay, the tone is going to set a little bit of what's going on, basically a little bit basically of how that should be happening. Basically the overtone is going to be basically saying what's the entire scene going to feel like, and then you're slowly building with basically the dice, basically that the end game you have in there basically feels like it does a good job of kind of building up of things are slowly starting to fall into place. It isn't just constantly basically we're just kind of riffing until we're done. It is we're building towards something. Basically, I do like the fact that it also feels like you're talking a lot with your players in terms of building them up, in terms of basically you're handing dice to players in some scene. Someone else can call out something that someone else has done and be like, I like that. That's now a major part of the game. There's a lot of that in this game of involving everybody at the table. And that feels basically that kind of goes back to that. It feels like you're pulling in that movie aspect of everybody is important. Everybody has something to do in this. This isn't just background characters and things like that. And we're eventually coming to it.
I mean, like one of my, one of the joys I find from running this game is just sitting down with like just an opening image in my head. That's it. Like I don't, and having literally no clue where any of this is going to end up or what's going to happen, and so it's not a secret, although I was just about to say it is. The secret goal of the discovery phase, which is the phase in which we just experience the world through the rogue's senses or memories or whatever, is that phase doesn't end until the overplayer says it ends. And the overplayer is, in the rules, I'm like, just listen to them until you have an idea of where the story's going. Like, let them come up with all these things, and hear what they want, what they want to see in this world, right? Like this is a moment of like and it's great because like I don't need to fret about coming up with like the most out of the blue, the most interesting thing for the players,
Mhm.
right? They're going to say, "Hey, I have an interest in this. Let's go for it." And if I agree, we're going to go for it. And that's, um, it's a nice contract to work under when you're playing a game.
Mhm. And you're also basically in your basically in the stuff that you're putting into the center, you're not just basically all the morals, the threads as you call them, basically
Hmm.
are reminding basically giving people something to work with. It isn't just
Yeah.
free associate go. You have something to build with, basically to throw your life. Like if you're like, oh, I need something, you have
Yeah.
a kind of a set of notes in the center of the table to be like, oh, I should reference back to this or that, or basically move on from basically keep going with that idea.
Yeah, you
Um,
have to like echo and reincorporate them, and that keeps the story going in that direction. Like that, the things that are important to you kind of spill out, and then you're like, oh yeah, this is what the story is going to be about. Let's go
mhm.
for it. Yeah.
Yeah, and kind of coming back briefly to this, you talked about character creation.
Hmm.
Basically, again, this did basically we haven't really said it. This really does lead a little bit more towards one shot kind of play. Like you could link them together like a series of movies or
Yeah.
things like that. But again, it's mostly meant to be you've come together like you talked about on the train. It sounds like where you're like, hey, let's do this. And basically, this is something that can be done. You said 45 minutes for a speed run of it, but it's not meant to last for months. It's meant to last for hours. It feels like,
Right.
and even
Yeah.
the character creation is also kind of part of that. We skipped over it. It's very much just kind of I hate to use the phrase name and claim, but it's basically that same idea. Basically, I have a character. I'm going to claim these things about the character, and
Right.
you're basically once you've done that, you're good. You're not. There are no stats. There are no basically. There's no inventory system. Basically, there are some abilities that you can come up with. Basically, like basically the zine has some, and I feel like the
Yeah.
basically the Kickstart book is probably going to have a bigger selection for you to choose from in terms of a little bit more of a menu. Um,
Yeah. Like those things, they're called tricks. I think that's what you're referring to.
yeah, basically the tricks and the feats I think are the two things.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. The feats are like something that you write that's like not a thing your character does all the time, but like it's a thing that your character could do,
Mhm,
and it's something that at some point in the game you're gonna roll the dice. You're gonna be like, I just don't like the result of those dice, so
mhm,
I'm going to do this thing that I've written down earlier instead, right? Like if, sing the dirge of my people as I run into battle, knowing it'll be my last moment,
mhm,
and you're like,
mhm.
you roll the dice and you're like, I don't. This is
Not
not a
this
happy
way.
moment.
Not this
Yeah,
way.
we're gonna go this way. Yeah. Um, but the tricks are actually they're more for the players than the characters. They're just like ways that the players can sort of change the rules of the game
Mhm,
uh, to either draw the focus onto their own character or draw it to something that they, a very simple and straightforward trick is I don't remember the name of it, but you just write down something you want to fight. And between phases, you could be like, this next phase is a perilous phase, and we're fighting this. You're like, you know, I want to fight a T Rex, or I want to
yep.
fight my brother who became a
Mhm,
wizard killer. That
mhm.
kind of thing. Like, yeah.
There will come a
So
reckoning.
it's
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, yeah, yeah. But yeah, there's no like strength scores or
Mhm,
that sort of stuff. Making the characters quick. It's meant to be you draw together a bunch of inspiration, and then you can um, play out these adventures that your character has. They're meant to be. I think of them like, yeah, definitely like short stories. I'm pointed at the sword and sorcery short story. You can certainly stitch a bunch of them together. But one thing I really love, we're calling this a fix up, right? Like the the reprint or the re-release of the game,
mhm,
because we're taking a bunch of old material I've written on the game, putting it all together, plus a bunch of new material. And this is fix up as a term that the pulp authors used for when they wrote a bunch of short stories and then somebody wanted to publish them as a novel, so they had to kind of rewrite the story a little bit to just the barest thread between the stories so that they fit as a novel. That was called a fix-up. And like that is also kind of like how these adventures go. I one thing I really enjoyed the Fafhrd and Grey Mouser series, and I think like at least twice they've discovered where the stars come from, and they're completely different answers each time. Like it's just like, you know, there's the Jack Vance's Dying Earth. There's a character. Oh, I'm blanking on the character's name, but there's two short stories about this character, and in both short stories, he dies before the end of the story. So it's like did one happen before the other? Like what's going on? Like I love that. Like I want that sort of infidelity to the chronology, or you know, because I'm not saying there's anything wrong with like wanting to have like locked down the order in which all the Conan stories went, but it's not going to work. Like it doesn't, or lock down the order in which all the Sherlock Holmes stories. It's just not going to work. They weren't written that way. And I would love to I'd love to like free us up to just kind of like, yeah, that's fine. It's fine. Some of these stories are apocryphal, maybe, or
the inconsistency and the contradictions of it help to make the legend, as it were. Basically, it makes you question, well, what was true, what wasn't? Well, that's part of the story. That's part of the idea that these people were so big they don't necessarily fit inside of a normal idea.
Yeah.
It's basically so same with these kind of this fiction, things like that. Basically, I guess one big question I'd have of you is, how have you seen your players? Basically, you've been doing this for decades, it sounds like, at this point. Basically, how have you seen players kind of reacting to when you presented this to them? Basically, how have they since obviously the friends you wrote it with had an initial great reaction, but basically other people you presented with, how have you seen them either grow with it, if you take that from it, and even take that stuff from out in that game to outside of it as well?
Yeah, I mean, that's always like, that is always like a little bit. There's always this leap when I bringing a game. It doesn't matter what game, but you're bringing it to a crowd, and you're like, okay, I need to, like in contrast to like say I was, instead of a game designer, I was a musician, right? I got up in front of a crowd and I started playing a song. Right away, they're gonna be like, oh, this is a song. I get to listen to, like, how to interact with a song right away. The first thing you do with a game is you're like, I'm now going to teach you how to interact with it. We're going to have like a little seminar. We're going to do homework before we play the game. It is a rough way to like present art. Like it's not there's a reason why like role-playing games lean on illustrations the way they do, because you need an in, right? Like you need, so anyways, you sit down and I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you how the game works. I'll have a spiel pretty close to what I just did at the top of this the show here, but like a little bit longer because I have to get into some gritty details. And I'm also like, don't worry, as we'll play, I'll re-explain all this. That's fine. Because I can teach the game and play a full version of it in about 2 hours to 2.5 hours, depending on like, how we're feeling or whatever. It's not very long until like it starts clicking for people. But in that very beginning, the first like sort of phase of the game before it starts clicking, it's always like a little like people, they're like, okay, we're going to trust you, but don't abuse this trust, right? Like don't, but once people start writing things down, once like the first time someone writes something down in a motif, that's like someone has said to someone else at the table, I like what you did there. Like what you did there forced my hand and I had to write this down, right? Like that was awesome. And then people are like, oh, I get it. That's what we're shooting for. Like, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to impress each other here. And yeah, I think people tend to have like a really good reaction to it. There's been over the years some hacks of it that came out. One of which Michael Miller, who did With Great Power, which was a superhero role playing game, did a second edition that was based on Swords Without Master, which is awesome. I don't want to like get into listing the hacks here because I run the risk of leaving ones out and then I feel like a jerk. But there are hacks out there. There's some published and some that are just some published and sold, and some that are just published so you can pick them up, and some that are just like sitting in people's notebooks. They're playing with friends or whatever. And I really love hearing about how people are like, you know, taking it and doing, finding out like how the tones of what new tones they could apply to the genre that they're trying to like attach it to, and have they come up with a new way to do phases. The phases for me, I was like, I got to the 3 and I was like, I should have more, and I was like, no, I can't. I mean, there's a couple more in the advanced game, but like these 3 are just the only 3 I need to play most of the game. So no, I think it's amazing. I think when people make their characters, it's a lot of fun because you get to see like they're just gonna go a place where you don't expect it to go. You know, I like to assure people, like a lot of times when I run the game, I again running it for a bunch of new people. If we were like a regular group and we're like, we're gonna do a sword and sorcery and the setting is going to be like this, swords absolutely works for that. But like when I do like my demos and things like that, I blow that out of the water as much as possible. I base it on the old cartoon Thundar the Barbarian, if you've seen it.
Yep.
Which is like far in the distant future of our Earth. There's sword and sorcery,
post-apocalyptic fantasy. Yeah. It's a weird. Tony catches that one.
Yes. And I do that because it's not because Thundar is like a cultural touchstone, but because like it opens the field. Like Thundar, he fights robots, vampires from outer space, like along with wizards. Like there's a lot of like anything could go, and that I think because like a lot of times people are like, when I start talking about sword and sorcery, I'm like, I have very specific feelings and a very specific understanding of the genre. You're not going to share that because we're different human beings with different experiences with it. But I want to like get as close to mine as possible. But mine does in fact include time travelers or aliens with elephant heads, you know, like, and, you know, so like, you know, I want to make sure that people are open to that. And then once that happens, people are like, they just come up with amazing characters. I just love them. One of the things, I mean, we kind of mentioned before, the Idolon, Idolon. I spent...
you followed it. So you have the same trap I have of this, having seen it written for so long, and people are like, no, that's not what it means. Like, oh.
At least a decade of mispronouncing it. I'm trying to fix that. Well, one of the things we're doing for the Kickstarter, like when I ran it back in the day at conventions, I would show up with this giant stack of fantasy art cards that like, you know, just collectible trading cards that I had picked up off of a table full of like, here's free stuff if you want to take it from some convention. I was like, that's a pile of like art cards. I went through, took out all the ones that I thought could possibly work, you know, with the fantasy, because there was a ton of art cards, but some, you know, but like, you know, had a dinosaur on it, that goes in, you know, had a wizard on it, that goes in, you know, here's a great one. This guy's playing an electric guitar, but whatever, that'll work. It's fine. Sure. You know, like, yeah, why not? And you know, a lot of these art cards are covers to old fantasy novels that I remember fondly, and a lot of artists that I really enjoy. And it was immense fun to just kind of spread those out in front of like at the table and be like, have at it. Like, find your Idolon. Like, figure your character out from this. So one of the things we're going to do with the Kickstarter is we've contacted a bunch of artists, and I'm going to make we're going to put together a deck of tarot-sized cards called the Idolon Folios, and it's just going to be just art to inspire characters by. There's going to be stuff on the back that's also going to be helpful for making characters and for just like getting stories going. If you're just like sitting down and let's play a game of swords, you don't have to have anything. You just pull some cards out of the deck and that's fine. But we're going to shoot for like different, like a run of cards from different artists. You know, like an artist will do several different cards, and we might shoot for like themed decks so that it'll have like, so you can take it and be like, I want to take this group of cards, put them together. This is the, you know, the strange fantasy robot cards and the fallen post-apocalyptic world of fairies. These two genre, you know, whatever they are, I'm going to shuffle them together. These are the ones we're going to do for our game tonight. Like, this is, you can kind of construct the I was going to say, themes, like
the overall theme of the world.
Out of these cards. Like, you can make this decision with the other players. Be like, I want to include these cards, I want to include these cards, and then you go through them and make your character from that. I'm really excited about that idea, and really excited about the artists that we got.
Nice.
There's a bunch of them listed on the Kickstarter. You should check them out because it's very exciting.
One quick thing before this game, I want to talk more about the Kickstarter and things like that. But one last thing I want to touch on is basically we talked a little bit about trust and things like that with players and things like that. Basically, one of the things I did appreciate is basically the back section of basically the original, and probably I'm assuming into Kickstarter as well, as those rituals that you have, which are essentially tools for the players to guide the story, bring others in without basically, and also steer away from basically things that they're like, hey, let's not do X or Y. Basically, we talked a lot basically here. Basically, we talk a lot about GMing and things like that. We GM basically everything from your basic basically D&D game to your horror games, things like that. And having those safety features there is important. And I like the fact that there are built-in things not only to get people involved you think might be struggling or otherwise, like, hey, this person's not getting, basically doesn't seem to be participating, but let me pull them into my action. I think that's the ritual of the companion. There's also stuff where it's like, hey, that's basically you've gone too far, you've done something that doesn't really fit with what we're doing here, or that doesn't work at all. Basically, hey, that's, you know, your overturns are getting a little bit, basically you're not suiting the vibe of the table. Let's move away from that. And I like the fact that you've got those in there as just a nope. Basically, let's back it off. Let's change it. Let's keep it focused. And anybody at the table can kind of invoke that. Basically,
I mean, like, sword and sorcery is a genre with, I mean, it's got a problematic history. They like. It's not alone amongst genres, like so many of them do, and it doesn't have to be problematic. Like that's not like, I don't think that's the something that's tied to its core. And so I want to like give people the tools to just be like, hey, let's make sure that this is not doing this or but also like make those available for non mission critical things. Like you could be like, hey, I really don't want robots in my story. Like I really like, it just really ruins it for me if we think of, you know, robots fighting with swords. Like I don't understand where that person's coming from, but I can for an hour I can be with, you know, them on that, right? Like that doesn't, I can find common ground with them anyways. So and together we can heal. We can find it.
We can find the way. I do have at least one friend who is I don't want robots in my fantasy at all. I just basically, robots are sci-fi and it's fine if we're in a sci-fi setting. Don't want them in my fantasy at all. So it's been kind of like, huh, okay, that's good. You kind of move on. But So the Kickstarter basically is basically, you talked a little bit about this being the fix up. What all basically, so we talked a little bit basically, there's, it sounds like there's a lot of cool stuff kind of being put together for basically
Right.
what this is. So you want to talk a little bit about what people can basically, what people can expect. Like, I know
Sure.
you've talked about like, hey, this exists, basically this kind of exists already. Um it's basically, you may already, basically, I think you mentioned to me once, like, you may already own it because you may already have it in an itch.io bundle from years and years
Yes.
ago. But
Yeah.
this is basically going to be so much more than that. And so if you want to talk about what, basically, you talked about the Idolon cards, and things
Yeah.
like that, more art and other stuff. What else is going into this?
Yeah. So I mean, like, we're still putting together. The Kickstarter hasn't been launched yet. You can go there and you can follow. So there's what I'm just that's my way of prefacing this with a disclaimer. Like, I'm not guaranteeing any of these things just yet, but the plans are.
Could be even cool.
What's that?
It could be even cooler.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. The plans are is to have it in its own standalone book, and in addition to that book, you're going to be able to get these Idolon Folios, which are these tarot cards full of just gorgeous art and maps and things like that that are just meant to inspire. And the book itself is going to have the game as it exists in Worlds Without Master issue 3. Although, like, I'll probably update some of the text. I was definitely going to update some of the text, but like, not. I say that I just want people to realize that we're not like redesigning a new edition.
Mm.
Like, this is the game as it exists. Like, we're adding a bunch of stuff to it, but it's all like in the optional sections and whatnot. There's going to be like I said before, there's going to be like these sort of mini games based on little parts of it. There's some delving into like related genres. There's a couple years back, I put out, I have to double that, 4 or 5 years ago, I put out the Rogue Scroll, which was a way to play this game without an overplayer, and had like a nice solo character creation system. And then I put out Star Ward, which was how to do a space fantasy. Say you want to do like a space fantasy that was inspired by Kurosawa films and like World War One dog or two dog fights, or man, there was another example I had in there. Oh, Lee Brackett books, like
Oh,
that sort of thing. And this is how you could do that with swords. And then there's a few others that are going to be along those lines. There's going to be additional material for. There's like a section in the book that is very small. I really wanted, when I was originally doing the one in the magazine, I had what was called the Book of Perils, which was just going to be a bunch of like things you could encounter that you could deal with or whatever. And I can't remember how many. There's like 4 or 5 things in there because I just didn't have the room in the magazine to put that many in. And I definitely want to expand on that. There's going to be, man, I'm blanking on some of the other plans that we have. Like, there's a lot of these things that I have written over the years. I had a set of rules for what to do when you're actually engaging with an actual play of it, right?
hmm.
A way to play as like a wizard scrying, observing your orb, where you're watching the rogues that are the people that are live streaming it,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
your interactions with it that way. So you've got like scrying rules
Mm-hmm.
and whatnot. Because I was like, there's something here, right? Like, there's got to be
Mm-hmm.
something to do. People, engage that sort of a little bit more of a playful relation to it. And what else was there? Like I had mentioned before, we're going to come at the rules from several different angles, so that, like, if you're reading one section, you're like, this is not working for me, you can just move on to the next one and try it again, right? Like, one experience I had back in the heyday, right? Like back in sorry, not the heyday, salad days. Back in my youth, in the 80s and the 90s, just I'd read these rules and I would be like, I'm not entirely sure what that's supposed to be. And then there's an example of play, and I'd read that and I'd be like, oh, that feels like a very different rule than what this thing. I now get what's going to happen. And today, we have live streams to help explain some of that, but I want to like put all that in the text there. I want to have like nice examples of play for people to go through, and one of the things that when you're writing a game, one of the things you have to do is you have to convince people that they can play it, right? It's a weird thing to say, but like I think a lot of times people will read a game, the further it is outside their comfort zone, right? Like a comfort zone is not a great term for that, but you know what I'm saying. Like further outside their what they're familiar with, even if they have like a desire to play the game, they might think, oh, I'll get it to the table and I won't know what to do. I won't know how to do this or whatever. And I want to be able to just be like, it's fine. You'll be fine. You're not alone. The other players are. It's not the kind of game where you're projecting, the entertainment outward. Like it's a back and forth. It's a conversation with the other players, and together you'll figure this out. You'll be able to do this. It's not as scary as it seems. But to do that, to like assure people of that, I want to like meet them where they're at when it comes to like how they like to learn the rules, right? Like I want to be able to, provide them with the thing that they need to feel confident enough to go forward and play that game. Because like I said, you'll be fine. There's nothing to worry about. I know that doesn't. I know that doesn't necessarily ring true. I get nervous before every game, whether or not I designed it or someone else. Like playing with friends that I've played with for decades, I'm still like, oh, like it's just, yeah.
There's always a little bit. I am providing entertainment. I need to be entertaining. Basically, how is this going to work? Basically, and once you get into it, and especially in this system where basically like if you as the overplayer kind of basically get tired of narrating all the time, basically you can be like, hey, let's switch this to rogues. Basically the rogue phase where basically I just say, I'm going to ask you something of you and then let you go, and then let the dice kind of move around the table that way. Basically again, that shifted dynamic of I don't have to be, oh wait, I'm only providing a little bit, then I can pick it up when I feel like, oh, I've got a cool idea. And it's great. Basically, I can see that a lot of people would be, oh, now I've got this cool idea. Once they get into it, they're like, oh, I can pick up the dice and I can say something and basically make it happen. And basically, you're not allowed to re-pick up the dice. That was another interesting thing to prevent quarterbacking. I'm certain basically use a board gaming term. Basically, one person can't dominate a session because they have to put the dice down and let someone else go.
Yeah. Everything you do in that game is ends up being like a something you're doing with someone else. You can't just narrate. I mean, there are times where you are given the floor to just narrate, but the result of that almost always is then handed over to someone else for them to like put the button on or to do, and sometimes like it's really lovely to have your friends just narrate. Sometimes they're going to spin a yarn and you're going to be like, that was amazing. Like whatever, So, but yeah, exactly. There's moments in it where you're just like, okay, I just need a beat where you play amongst yourselves. Like I just need a moment, and you can let them go.
Yeah, it's great. Basically, it's a great system for basically encouraging that and basically helping you push that. Basically, what you play in this, what you get in this, basically it's a universal. Basically, you could take this to your next D&D session. Basically, the things that you learn from here and be like, oh hey, this has made me But basically, one of the things I'm fond about talking about is one of the great things with tabletop RPGs is no one's enforcing the rules at any given point. There isn't a judge that will rip your D&D book out of your hand if you
Right.
don't follow the rules exactly and kick you out. If you want to take some of the stuff that you've gotten in this game and be like, hey, I think some of this stuff would be cool to put into our next D&D session, things like that. It's a great way to learn, basically, to come in here and be like, oh, these are cool ideas. Basically, it's worth a read. Even if you're like, oh, maybe my group wouldn't necessarily be interested in playing it, reading it as a GM is always a great thing, just because you pick up a set of new tools, a set of new things of the show, basically, show us. Basically in the rogue section, the leading questions from the discovery section and things like that are great tools for any GM to have just in their back pocket of, hey, you know what? Let me push this onto the players. Let me see what they're thinking, and let them write the story for a bit, because it's going to turn out to be a better story that everyone enjoys if everybody's actively writing it. That's the joy of a TTRPG, is everybody gets to write it. Basically, and it's not, that's the secret. That's also the secret, is the players are writing the story. Even in any game, the players are writing the story as much as the DM is. It's not a video game where you have to go through whatever paths have been programmed in. The DM is going to change things on the fly, reacting to what you give to them, what energy you bring to the table. But games like this are great for encouraging that energy to basically to be there. I did want to come on one thing, basically, the City and Fire and Coin, you mentioned that briefly, basically, as being a pre-written thing. Is that also part of this, basically going to be part of this fix-up as well? So this will come with, basically, if you're really like, oh, I have no idea how to deal with this, there will be a bit of a pre-written adventure in there, basically, for people to kind of get you started and kind of get that flowing.
It was an interesting experiment writing it way back when, because it's the kind of game where... even more, well, no, hold on, I don't want to, well, okay, here's the thing, right? I start off the City of Fire and Coin. I put you in a perilous phase. You roll the dice for your overtone. Depending on which tone you end up with, I'll tell you what's happening, whether you're coming away from it's the middle of the night and you're slinking away from a temple tower that you thought you were going to rob of all their riches, but they had nothing there for you to rob, and you're going to be caught by the guards. Or if you rolled a jovial, you're out on the market street and you bump into a pickpocket and you go to chase after them, and then suddenly a bunch of thugs with an axe to grind surround you in the middle of the street, and they attack. And then you play out the perilous phase, but it kind of it holds your hand while you're doing it. It's you're gonna roll, but let's ignore that roll for a moment and just assume you rolled a mystery, and let's describe what a mystery does, that kind of thing. And then as you go along, it by the time you get to the second phase, it's all right, maybe you were captured, so we'll do something like that. Maybe you weren't, we'll do something like that. And then we're but now I can't help you anymore. There's no way that me, Epidiah, can have any clue what's going on at your table. So have at it, right? Yeah. But it just builds the rules as you go along, and then lets you go. And I've that's out there. You can pick that up right now on Itch. I think we have it for pay what you want or whatever, but pick it up for free. That's fine. We're going to have it also in the rules text. I'm considering making it a couple other ones just like it, to just kind of I really want to know what it's like to start with different phases. Let's see, can I rewrite these? It depends on how pressed for time I am, but I think there's a number of ways in this game where you can write scenarios, and all you need to do will fit on a note card, right? Everything you need for the scenario will fit on the note card. And I think I'm going to have a bunch of those sorts of to choose from in the back. Just, hey, let's go with this. Let's go with this. Let's go with this. This is bring the lift, make as little lift as necessary to play the game, because I think like you were saying, it's if you already have people that know how to play the game. It like in the past that I don't necessarily want to market it like this, but just hear me out here. Your regular game, so and so can't make it this week, but you really want to play something. I'm just saying this fits really well. Like this is just like, yeah, okay, we'll just do this week. You know, this is
one shots
off week. Yeah,
one shots are always great for that. Basically, I always like encouraging people to do one shots because, basically, hey, you can still meet. You don't have to cancel your session.
Yeah.
And B, it's going to give you a chance to do things that you may not ordinarily do, whether that's not be the GM for once or, hey, what's player death like? What's basically things that you may not do in your thing? What does an epic battle on the ship basically feel like? What does an end of a story feel like? Because those are cool, basically things that you may not get to experience in your normal campaign because it's going to take months to get there. But a game like a one shot, and especially a one shot like this, can give you that feeling and go, oh, I like that. I want to make sure that I get that. Or, ooh, I didn't like the way that feels. Basically, my players didn't like the way that felt. Let's avoid that in our other game, and no one is going to walk away hurt from, oh, hey, basically this character which we created to be a one-shot and basically possibly die horribly or go on to greater glory, did either of those. Basically, and so it's great for that. Tony posted basically Unwritten Earth. I know basically Unwritten Earth is the publisher for this. That's you, basically. You and basically Nathan, I believe
Nathan
it is.
Paoletto.
Yep.
Yeah.
Basically, this is kind of the first in a series of going back and revisiting some older stuff that you've done. So basically that itch link and things like that. Also the basically unwrittenearth.com as well, which I believe is in the description of this video if you're watching it on YouTube later. But basically that's a space to watch for more stuff like this. If you like this idea and you want to see more other things like that, I believe that's what it's for. Basically, not to steal too much of your thunder.
No, it's Nathan. He's the mind behind Worldwide Wrestling. He and I go way back. I think I've mentioned this before we started the show, but like for the past 8 years, we've been podcasting. The first 7 years of it, we've just been talking about the Rockford Files. But we're done that. We've gone through all the episodes of the Rockford Files. And now we're talking about the impetus for the Unwritten Earths was we wanted to continue doing this, but talking about game design. We both are game designers we want to talk about. So we have a podcast, the Unwritten Earth Symposium, where we talk about game design, and we design things along the way. And we just launched around this time last year. We already have like if you check out our itch page, you'll find the Adventure and Hobbyist Annual 2025, which is a annual of system adventurous scenarios that we plucked from Earths that don't exist. The concept that we gave ourselves was there's this magazine that exists in all of these unwritten Earths that doesn't exist in ours called the Adventure and Hobbyist. And we just went through all the ones from the year 2025 and just plucked out the best. And now we're offering that as offer it up to you. And like you said, we're bringing back swords, and we got other things in the hopper in the next few years. Yeah, really excited to be putting this together.
Awesome. Well, we're wrapping up on time here, so basically I will hand it over to you for one last basically final pitch. Basically anything you want, anything you wanted to talk about we didn't get to before we wrap this up. Basically in terms of Swords That Master, the Kickstarter, or anything like that.
Check out the Kickstarter. I mean, yeah, if you're into sword and sorcery, if you're into weird games, the weird way games can interact with players, different ways that we can tell good stories together, check it out. Yeah.
Awesome, and basically I think early 2026. Basically, obviously follow the Kickstarter if you want to be notified, but I believe it's early 2026 is the hoped for. Obviously, in today's world, dates are ephemeral and
yes,
anything could happen. But all right, basically, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me here. Basically, again, we are Lurelink. Basically, this is we love highlighting cool games like I talked about earlier. basically checking out a game, even if basically you're not going to play it, basically is a great way of learning basically new tools, new ways of doing it, and they can give you basically that chance to, oh hey, we're not being able to do our normal thing. Let's do something unusual. Let's do something interesting. Lorelink, of course, is our GM toolkit for being able to take notes and things like that, being able to do a one shot of something like this and then record what happens and be able to save it and share it with your players, and especially if you're doing an online version of it, things like that. So basically, if you're interested in checking out Lorelink, obviously, basically you can go to our link that will show up here magically thanks to the mods that we have. Basically that can get you two free campaigns. So you can basically do a Swords About Master game and record all the cool stuff that happens in there, and then be able to come back to it later and reference it, or take that world, that nugget of a world you started designing, and blow it up into something bigger and better and things like that. I say better, basically bigger and basically more expansive. And basically, of course, basically, if you want to know more about like indie creators and things like that, basically we have a whole cool slate of them. Also, basically, more cool people like Epidiah coming in next month in January. If you want to be notified about those or find out what's going on, obviously you can check out our newsletter, which is a great way of basically getting it mailed to you. You can check out our Blue Sky account, which will give you basically posts about all the cool stuff we're doing and things like that. And basically, of course, last but not least, you're on Twitch. There's a button that says follow. If you click that button, Twitch will notify you when we go live and tell you what cool thing we're doing. So basically, you can click on that. Our follower goal was met. Yay! And so basically, that's a quick way of being notified with that. And of course, obviously, there's a button that says subscribe. That is there for if you're like, hey, I really like what you're doing, I want to drop you a quick encouragement. Obviously, that is never required. We don't do subscription-only, basically subscriber-only streams or things like that. But we always appreciate it, and we can make the guarantee, unlike Jeff Bezos, that we won't spend the money that you give us on yachts or anything like that. So if you want to use your Twitch Gaming Prime subscription, basically you could use that to get a free $5 out of Jeff Bezos' pocket into ours, and we will use it to buy a DLC yacht, maybe. I don't know. Basically, of course, also, basically, this is available later on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, obviously, liking, commenting, and basically subscribing, horse armor. Liking, subscribing, basically over there, a great way of encouraging us over there as well. But we also have a whole, basically, YouTube archive of all of our discussions with different creators and our different game streams and things like that. Basically, we might have a stream next week. Basically, the stream next week is hazy. It's kind of a quantum Schrödinger stream. Basically, it'll exist or not until we collapse that waveform. So obviously, it's a gaming stream with 20 and Mike. Awesome. So yes, be back here next Tuesday for a gaming stream, basically where we sit back and we try to talk about things. I won't be there because of basically chaos with family planning and things like that. But basically, it's a great stream. Check that out next week. And as always, basically, check out, basically, it is Christmas Eve, yes. So enjoy the holidays, stay safe. Basically, if your temperature is going up or down or sideways like it is here on the roller coaster, be safe out there. Basically, hopefully you get everything you want over the holidays. Basically, cool games, cool stuff. Basically, come back and see us and check us out later. Catch you all later. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.